In the unforgiving heat of Somalia's Lower Shabelle region, what began as the largest counterterrorism operation in recent military history became a nightmare of epic proportions when two 8-7 elite Navy SEALs found themselves surrounded by overwhelming al-Shabaab forces in a meticulously planned ambush. With conventional rescue impossible and time running out, their survival depended on a single person positioned on a distant ridge. Staff Sergeant Nicole Phoenix Thorne, an elite military sniper with an impossible shot and an even more impossible choice, would either save them all through precision fire and tactical brilliance, or watch helplessly as America's finest warriors were systematically eliminated in the Horn of Africa's most hostile territory. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the arid landscape of Somalia as Staff Sergeant Nicole Thorne adjusted her scope for the third time in 10 minutes. The heat shimmer rising from the scorched earth below made precise calculations challenging, but she had dealt with worse conditions during her 8 years as a military sniper. Her weathered hands, steady despite the 110-degree temperature, moved with practiced efficiency across her rifle's familiar surfaces. "Phoenix, this is Eagle Eye," crackled the voice of Captain Angela Singh through Nicole's earpiece. "Final equipment check before deployment. How's your position?" Nicole swept her Barrett M82A1 sniper rifle across the valley below, the weapon's weight distributed perfectly across the rocky outcropping that served as her hide site. "Eagle Eye, Phoenix. Position is solid. I have clear sight lines across the entire operational area. Range cards are updated for all primary and secondary targets." 3 miles below her elevated position, the sprawling village of Barawe appeared deceptively peaceful in the early morning light. Intelligence reports indicated that Captain Amjad al-Sharif, one of al-Shabaab's most dangerous cell leaders, was coordinating a major arms transfer from this location. The operation, designated Sand Viper, represented months of planning and the largest SEAL deployment in the region's recent history. Nicole had been positioned on this ridge for 18 hours, having infiltrated under cover of darkness with minimal equipment. Her hide site, carefully constructed among the natural rock formations, provided both concealment and multiple escape routes. More importantly, it offered overwatch coverage for the entire valley where the SEALs would soon be operating. "Copy that, Phoenix." Angela's voice carried a note of tension that Nicole recognized from previous operations. "Be advised, we're showing increased communications activity in your sector. Stay alert." The intelligence analyst's concern was well-founded. Nicole had noticed unusual movement patterns throughout the night. Small groups of armed men positioning themselves at strategic points around the village, communication antennas being erected on rooftops, and most concerning, what appeared to be heavy weapons being moved into concealed positions. The tactical picture was beginning to suggest something far more complex than a simple arms transfer. Nicole keyed her radio. "Eagle Eye, Phoenix. I'm observing possible defensive preparations in the target area. Multiple fighting positions being established, increased personnel movement. This doesn't look like a routine operation anymore. Phoenix, Eagle Eye, can you provide specific grid coordinates for observed positions?" Nicole methodically scanned the village through her scope, identifying and recording each suspicious location. Her training at the Army's sniper school had emphasized the importance of detailed reconnaissance, and she applied those skills now with clinical precision. Each building, each alleyway, each potential firing position was cataloged and assigned a priority designation. "Eagle Eye, I count at least 40 fighting positions established around the village perimeter. They're not just defending the arms transfer. They're prepared for a major engagement." The silence that followed Nicole's report lasted longer than usual. When Angela's voice returned, it carried the weight of difficult decisions being made at command levels far above their pay grades. "Phoenix, maintain position and continue observation. Command is evaluating the situation." Nicole understood the implications. Somewhere in the command structure, senior officers were weighing the value of the intelligence against the safety of the SEAL teams preparing to insert. The decision would ultimately come down to acceptable risk levels and mission priority, calculations that rarely included the ground-level perspective of someone actually observing the target area. As she waited for further instructions, Nicole reflected on the path that had brought her to this rocky outcropping in the Horn of Africa. Growing up in rural Montana, She had learned to shoot before she could properly ride a bicycle. Her father, a Vietnam veteran turned hunting guide, had instilled in her both respect for firearms and an understanding of their devastating potential. Those early lessons in marksmanship had evolved through military training into a skill set that made her one of the Army's most effective long-range specialists. "Phoenix, this is Iron Lady," came a new voice through her earpiece. Colonel Rebecca Steele's distinctive tone cut through the radio traffic with unmistakable authority. "What's your assessment of the tactical situation?" Nicole took a moment to organize her thoughts before responding. Colonel Steele commanded respect throughout the Special Operations community, and her question deserved a complete answer. "Iron Lady, Phoenix. Based on 18 hours of observation, this appears to be a prepared ambush site rather than a routine arms transfer. Enemy forces have established interlocking fields of fire, positioned heavy weapons at key choke points, and implemented communications redundancy. If our teams insert as planned, they'll be walking into a kill zone." The radio fell silent again as Nicole's assessment was digested by the command structure. She could imagine the heated discussions taking place in the operations center, senior officers balancing intelligence value against force protection, political considerations against tactical realities. "Phoenix, Iron Lady, continue observation and report any changes. We're adjusting the operational timeline." Nicole acknowledged the transmission and settled in for what would clearly be an extended period of watching and waiting. The nature of her profession required patience above all other qualities. Hours could pass between significant developments, but when action occurred, it often happened with explosive suddenness. Through her scope, she observed the village's daily rhythm beginning to establish itself. Women emerged to collect water from the central well, children appeared in the narrow streets, and merchants began setting up their modest stalls. To casual observation, Barawe appeared to be nothing more than another struggling Somali village, but Nicole's trained eye continued to identify anomalies that suggested otherwise. "Eagle Eye, Phoenix, I'm observing coordination between multiple groups that isn't consistent with normal village activity. Someone is exercising command and control over these people." Angela's response came quickly. "Phoenix, can you identify the command element?" Nicole adjusted her scope's magnification and began a systematic search of the village center. Command posts typically positioned themselves to maximize communication capabilities while maintaining security. In a village like Barawe, that usually meant the largest building with the best sightlines. "Eagle Eye, I believe the command post is located in the two-story building at grid reference 7,734,521. Multiple antennas, regular messenger traffic, and what appears to be a security perimeter." As she continued her observation, Nicole noticed a disturbing pattern developing. The defensive positions she had identified earlier were being reinforced with additional personnel and equipment. This wasn't the gradual buildup typical of a routine security enhancement. This was the rapid deployment of forces expecting imminent contact. Her radio crackled with a new transmission from an unfamiliar call sign. "Phoenix, this is Tank. We're beginning our approach to the insertion point. What's the current situation in your sector?" Nicole recognized the voice of Master Chief Petty Officer Felix Dubois, one of the most experienced SEAL operators in the command. His team would be among the first to insert, and his request for current intelligence indicated that the operation was moving forward, despite her warnings about the tactical situation. "Tank, Phoenix. No change in the threat assessment. Multiple defensive positions remain active, and I'm observing continued reinforcement of the target area. Recommend extreme caution on approach." "Copy that, Phoenix. We'll adjust our tactics accordingly." Nicole watched through her scope as the first helicopters appeared on the horizon, small dots against the harsh morning sky that gradually resolved into the distinctive silhouettes of military aircraft. The sight filled her with a mixture of professional pride and deep concern. These were among America's finest warriors, but they were flying into a situation that appeared far more dangerous than originally assessed. The lead helicopter, carrying Tank's team, began its approach to the primary landing zone. Nicole tracked its progress through her scope while simultaneously monitoring the village for any signs of reaction. What she observed sent a chill through her despite the oppressive heat. "All stations, Phoenix. The enemy is tracking our aircraft. I can see personnel moving to prepared positions throughout the village. This is definitely an ambush." As the words left her lips, the morning air erupted with the distinctive crack of automatic weapons fire. The ambush had begun, and 287 of America's elite warriors were flying directly into the most sophisticated trap she had ever witnessed. Nicole's finger moved to her rifle's trigger as she prepared to do whatever was necessary to protect the teams below, knowing that her actions in the next few hours would determine whether any of them would see home again. The distinctive whine of rocket-propelled grenades sliced through the morning air as Nicole watched the lead helicopter shudder under impact. Black smoke poured from its engine compartment, but the pilot maintained control, desperately seeking a safe landing zone as automatic weapons fire erupted from concealed positions throughout the village below. "Mayday, Mayday! This is Hawk 1 taking heavy fire." Lieutenant Commander Garrett Caldwell's voice cut through the radio chaos, his calm professionalism intact despite the crisis. "We're going down hard. All stations, the LZ is compromised." Nicole's training took over as she acquired her first target through the scope. An Al-Shabaab fighter manning a heavy machine gun position on a rooftop had just opened fire on the struggling helicopter. At 847 meters, the shot would require precise compensation for wind, elevation, and the target's movement. She controlled her breathing, found her natural respiratory pause, and squeezed the trigger with steady pressure. The Barrett's thunderous report echoed across the valley as the .50 caliber round found its mark. The enemy gunner's weapon fell silent, his body crumpling behind the concrete barrier. Nicole was already working the bolt action, chambering another round while scanning for her next target. "Phoenix to all stations." She transmitted while tracking a second heavy weapons position. "I have eyes on multiple enemy positions, engaging targets of opportunity to support the insertion." The damaged helicopter managed a controlled crash, landing in a dry riverbed 200 meters from the intended LZ. Through her scope, Nicole watched as Tank and his 12-man team poured out of the aircraft, immediately establishing a defensive perimeter as enemy fire intensified around their position. "Tank, this is Phoenix," she radioed while lining up another shot. "You have enemy positions at your 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock. I'm engaging the 10 o'clock position now." Her second shot eliminated another machine gunner, buying Tank's team precious seconds to establish better cover. But Nicole could see the scope of the ambush expanding beyond anything they had anticipated. Enemy fighters were emerging from concealed positions throughout the valley, creating interlocking fields of fire that threatened to trap the SEALs in a deadly crossfire. "Phoenix, this is Iron Lady," Colonel Steele's voice carried grim urgency. "We're showing at least 4 additional helicopter insertions under heavy fire. What's your assessment of enemy strength?" Nicole swept her scope across the battlefield, counting muzzle flashes and identifying firing positions with the methodical precision that had made her one of the Army's most effective snipers. What she observed exceeded even her worst-case estimates from earlier reconnaissance. "Iron Lady, Phoenix. I count at least 200 enemy fighters in prepared positions. This isn't just an ambush, it's a full-scale coordinated assault designed to annihilate our forces." As if to emphasize her point, 2 more helicopters came under intense fire as they attempted to insert additional SEAL teams. One aircraft, carrying Doc Flanagan's medical team, took multiple hits to its tail rotor and began spinning violently before crashing into a cluster of mud brick buildings on the village's eastern edge. "Doc's bird is down," shouted someone over the radio net. "We need immediate medical evacuation." Nicole shifted her scope toward the crash site, where she could see survivors moving among the wreckage. Enemy fighters were already converging on the location, attempting to eliminate the downed Americans before they could establish defensive positions. "All stations, Phoenix. I'm providing overwatch for the eastern crash site. Enemy forces are moving to engage survivors." Her third shot shattered the skull of an Al-Shabaab fighter preparing to throw a grenade into the wreckage. The fourth eliminated a sniper who had been drawing a bead on Doc Flanagan as the medic attempted to treat wounded team members in the debris field. But for every enemy fighter Nicole eliminated, 2 more seemed to appear from hidden positions throughout the village. The scope of Al-Shabaab's preparation was becoming devastatingly clear. They had known exactly when and where the American forces would insert, and they had prepared accordingly. "Ghost! Ghost! This is Viper!" First Sergeant Valentina Ramirez's voice cut through the radio traffic, tight with combat stress. "My reconnaissance team is surrounded at the southern insertion point. We need immediate support." Nicole swung her scope toward the coordinates Valentina had provided, where she could see muzzle flashes from what appeared to be a fierce firefight among a cluster of abandoned vehicles. Valentina's 8-person team was pinned down behind inadequate cover, facing overwhelming odds from multiple directions. Viper Phoenix, I see your position. Stand by for support fire. The mathematical calculations required for long-range precision shooting became second nature as Nicole engaged target after target around Valentina's position. Range, wind speed, target movement, ammunition selection, each variable processed with computer-like efficiency as she worked to thin the enemy forces threatening the trapped reconnaissance team. Phoenix, this is Tank. Master Chief Dubois transmitted from his position near the first crash site. We're establishing a casualty collection point at grid 7,734,856. Can you provide overwatch while we attempt to consolidate our scattered teams? Nicole studied the grid coordinates Tank had provided, recognizing immediately that it represented both opportunity and extreme risk. The location offered good defensive positions and clear fields of fire, but it also required movement across open ground under intense enemy observation. Tank Phoenix. Affirmative, but be advised that enemy snipers are active throughout the village. I count at least 6 positions with precision fire capability. As if summoned by her warning, the distinctive crack of a high-powered rifle echoed across the valley, followed immediately by someone screaming over the radio net. An enemy sniper had found his mark among one of the moving SEAL teams. Sniper! Sniper! Man down in the open! Nicole immediately began the deadly game of counter-sniper warfare, scanning building tops and elevated positions for any sign of enemy marksmen. The mathematics of sniper duels required patience, observation skills, and the ability to think like your opponent. Where would she position herself if she were defending this village? Which locations offered the best combination of concealment and fields of fire? A brief muzzle flash from a minaret 3 kilometers distant caught her attention. The enemy sniper had fired again, this time at Diesel Coleman's communications team, as they attempted to establish a command post near the southern edge of the village. Nicole calculated the range at just over 3,000 meters, an extreme distance even for her specialized equipment. The shot would require perfect conditions and flawless execution. She studied the wind indicators, adjusted her scope for the extended range, and waited for the enemy sniper to present himself again. The opportunity came 30 seconds later as the Al-Shabaab marksman repositioned for another shot. Nicole's round crossed the intervening distance in just under 4 seconds, striking the enemy sniper center mass and eliminating the threat to the American forces below. Phoenix to all stations. Enemy sniper in the minaret is neutralized. But as she worked the bolt to chamber another round, Nicole realized that the tactical situation was deteriorating faster than she could address individual threats. More helicopters were taking fire as they attempted to insert additional teams. Enemy reinforcements were arriving from outside the village, expanding the kill zone beyond anything the mission planners had anticipated. Eagle Eye, Phoenix. She transmitted to Captain Singh in the operations center. The enemy had advanced knowledge of our operation. This level of preparation and coordination isn't possible without detailed intelligence about our plans. Angela's response carried the weight of someone processing unthinkable possibilities. Phoenix, are you suggesting we have a security breach? Nicole continued engaging targets while considering the implications of what she was observing. The enemy positions were perfectly positioned to counter American tactics. Their timing was precise. Their coordination was flawless. Someone had provided them with detailed information about Operation Sandviper. Eagle Eye, I'm stating that the enemy knew we were coming. They knew when, they knew where, and they knew how many. This isn't tactical opportunism. This is strategic betrayal. The radio fell silent except for the ongoing reports of casualties and requests for support fire. In the operations center, senior officers were undoubtedly grappling with the possibility that their carefully planned operation had been compromised from within their own command structure. Phoenix, this is Steele. General Nathaniel Pemberton's voice cut through the tactical frequency, his Pentagon authority unmistakable even through the static. Maintain your position and continue providing support. We're assessing all possibilities. Nicole recognized the diplomatic language of senior officers unwilling to acknowledge the obvious, but her focus remained fixed on the immediate tactical situation, where American lives hung in the balance with each passing minute. Through her scope, she watched Tank's team beginning their movement toward the casualty collection point. 12 elite warriors, moving with practiced precision despite the chaos around them, each one trusting that their sniper overwatch would keep them alive during the dangerous transit across open ground. Nicole acquired her next target, an enemy fighter preparing to engage Tank's moving team with a rocket-propelled grenade. At 100 meters, the shot required split-second timing as both the target and Tank's team moved through her field of view. The Barrett thundered again, and another threat disappeared before it could endanger the American forces below. But as Nicole chambered her next round, she realized with growing dread that she was witnessing the beginning of something unprecedented in modern military history. 287 of America's elite warriors were being systematically surrounded by an enemy force that had known they were coming. The greatest challenge of her military career was just beginning, and failure meant watching helplessly as the finest soldiers in the world were annihilated in the killing fields of Somalia. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The acrid smell of cordite and burning aircraft fuel drifted up the ridge as Nicole chambered her 15th round of the engagement. Below, the village of Barawe had transformed into a hellscape of smoke, debris, and the constant staccato of automatic weapons fire. 3 more helicopters had attempted insertion in the past 20 minutes, each one met with devastatingly accurate fire from positions that seemed to anticipate every American tactical decision. Ranger, this is Diesel. Staff Sergeant Andre Coleman's voice crackled with static and strain over the communications net. I've lost contact with teams Charlie, Delta, and Foxtrot. Last known positions were grid squares 7,734 through 7,736, but enemy jamming is making coordination impossible. Nicole adjusted her scope toward the grid squares Coleman had referenced, scanning for any sign of the missing teams. Through the heat, shimmer, and smoke, she could make out scattered figures moving between buildings. But distinguishing friend from foe at this distance required careful observation of movement patterns and equipment silhouettes. Diesel Phoenix. I have visual on what appears to be American personnel in building complexes at 7,734,521 and 7,735,688. Both positions are surrounded by enemy forces attempting to close the noose. The tactical picture was becoming clearer with each passing minute, and it painted a devastating portrait of military precision turned against its creators. Every American doctrine, every standard operating procedure, every tactical innovation developed through decades of special operations warfare was being systematically countered by an enemy force that understood exactly how SEAL teams operated. Phoenix, this is Doc, came the voice of Petty Officer First Class Mason Flanagan from the eastern crash site. I've got 7 wounded here, 3 critical. We need immediate CASEVAC, but every time a bird approaches our position, they get lit up by coordinated fire. Nicole swept her scope across the approaches to Doc's position, identifying the overlapping fields of fire that made helicopter extraction impossible. Machine gun nests positioned on multiple rooftops, rocket-propelled grenade teams in concealed positions, and what appeared to be a sophisticated early warning network that gave enemy forces advance notice of any incoming aircraft. Doc, the enemy has established air denial over your sector. They're using overlapping heavy weapons positions to create a no-fly zone. You'll need to move your casualties to a more defensible position. Phoenix, we can't move the critical cases without proper medical support. These men will die if we try to relocate them. The impossible choice faced by every military medic in combat hung heavy in Doc's transmission. Move the wounded and risk killing them through trauma and blood loss, or remain stationary and risk having them overrun by enemy forces. Nicole understood that her next actions might determine which impossible choice Doc would have to make. She acquired a target through her scope, an enemy fighter attempting to maneuver a recoilless rifle into position to engage Doc's location. At 956 meters, the shot required compensation for a crosswind that had been steadily increasing throughout the morning engagement. The Barrett's report echoed across the valley as the enemy weapon team disappeared in a cloud of dust and debris. Nicole immediately shifted to a second target, another heavy weapons position that threatened the medical team's precarious position. Doc, you should have some breathing room now. I've eliminated the immediate heavy weapons threats to your position, but you need to establish better cover. They're gonna keep coming. Through her scope, Nicole watched Doc's team drag their wounded teammates into the partial cover of a collapsed wall. It wasn't ideal protection, but it was better than their previous exposure to enemy fire. Every small tactical victory mattered when facing overwhelming odds. "Phoenix, this is Hawk." Lieutenant Commander Garrett Caldwell's voice carried the weight of a commander watching his operation disintegrate. "We need to start thinking about extraction options. This mission is blown, and we're losing people every minute we stay here." Nicole had been thinking the same thing, but the tactical reality made extraction nearly impossible. The enemy had established control over all suitable landing zones, created air denial coverage that prevented helicopter operations, and positioned blocking forces along every possible egress route. "Hawk, Phoenix, extraction is going to be problematic. The enemy has anticipated every standard extraction protocol. They're positioned to interdict any conventional rescue attempt." "Then we need unconventional options," Hawk replied, "because conventional is getting my people killed." Nicole understood the lieutenant commander's frustration, but unconventional options required capabilities that simply weren't available. The nearest friendly forces were hours away, air support was being neutralized by sophisticated air defense networks, and the enemy held every tactical advantage except one. They didn't have a sniper positioned 3 miles away with clear lines of sight across their entire operation. "All stations, this is Tank." Master Chief Dubois broke into the communications net with the calm authority that had made him legendary among SEAL operators. "We're going to have to fight our way out of this. Phoenix, I need you to start identifying extraction routes that you can support with precision fire." Nicole began scanning the terrain between the scattered SEAL positions and potential extraction points beyond the enemy perimeter. The challenge was finding routes that avoided the heaviest concentrations of enemy forces, while remaining within her effective range for supporting fire. "Tank, the most viable route is through the dry riverbed system running north-northwest from your position. It provides cover from direct observation, but it's going to require crossing 3 major choke points where the enemy can concentrate fire. Can you cover those choke points from your position?" Nicole calculated angles and distances to the 3 locations she had identified. All 3 were within her effective range. But covering simultaneous movements through multiple choke points would require perfect timing and extraordinary precision. "Affirmative, but it's going to have to be coordinated movement. I can't cover 3 positions simultaneously if teams move independently." As they discussed extraction routes, Nicole noticed increased activity around what she had identified as the enemy command post. Vehicles were arriving and departing with increased frequency, radio antennas were being repositioned, and additional security personnel were being deployed around the 2-story building. "Eagle Eye, Phoenix, I'm observing significant activity at the enemy command post. Someone important just arrived and they're reinforcing security around the building." Captain Angela Singh's response came with unusual urgency. "Phoenix, can you identify the individual who arrived?" Nicole adjusted her scope's magnification and focused on the entrance to the command building. Through the heat shimmer and at extreme range, identification was challenging, but she could make out the general characteristics of the new arrival. "Eagle Eye, I see an older male, well-dressed, moving with obvious authority. He's accompanied by what appears to be a security detail of 6 personnel. The local forces are treating him with significant deference." "Phoenix, this is Iron Lady." Colonel Rebecca Steele's voice cut through the frequency with barely controlled tension. "We need positive identification on that individual. Can you get a clear photograph?" Nicole activated the digital camera integrated into her scope system, capturing several high-resolution images of the command post and its occupants. The technology would allow detailed analysis by intelligence personnel, potentially revealing the identity of whoever was coordinating the sophisticated ambush. "Iron Lady, images captured and transmitted, but I need to maintain focus on supporting the teams below. The enemy is preparing for another coordinated assault." Through her scope, Nicole could see Al-Shabaab fighters moving into assault positions around multiple SEAL team locations. The coordinated nature of their movement suggested that the new arrival at the command post had brought fresh tactical direction to the engagement. "All stations, Phoenix. Enemy forces are repositioning for what appears to be a coordinated assault on all American positions. I count at least 80 fighters moving into assault formations." The warning prompted immediate defensive preparations among the scattered SEAL teams, But Nicole could see that the enemy's numerical advantage was becoming decisive. Even with her supporting fire, the Americans were facing odds that threatened to overwhelm their defensive capabilities. Phoenix, this is Viper. First Sergeant Valentina Ramirez transmitted from her reconnaissance team's position. We're down to half our ammunition, and the enemy keeps probing our perimeter. If they assault in strength, we won't be able to hold. Similar reports began flooding the communications net as each isolated team reported diminishing ammunition, increasing enemy pressure, and wounded personnel who required immediate medical attention. The tactical situation was rapidly approaching a point where supporting fire alone would not be sufficient to prevent catastrophic losses. Tank Phoenix, I'm going to have to prioritize my supporting fire. Which teams are in the most immediate danger? Master Chief Dubois considered the question, while monitoring reports from his scattered teams. The answer required him to make the kinds of impossible choices that defined combat leadership, determining which of his people had the best chance of survival with limited supporting resources. Phoenix, prioritize Doc's medical team and Ghost's explosives team. They have the most wounded and the least defensive capability. Nicole acknowledged the guidance while privately recognizing that prioritizing some teams necessarily meant accepting greater risk for others. Combat required such decisions, but they never became easier regardless of experience or training. She acquired her next target, an enemy fighter attempting to place an improvised explosive device near Ghost's position. The shot was relatively straightforward at 645 meters, well within her comfort zone for precision engagement. The enemy fighter disappeared in the scope's field of view as Nicole's round found its target. She immediately began scanning for additional threats to the explosives team while monitoring enemy movement patterns around other American positions. Ghost, Phoenix, IED threat eliminated, but watch for additional attempts to mine your position. They're trying to restrict your movement options before launching their assault. Petty Officer 2nd Class Xavier Monroe's response carried grim appreciation. Copy, Phoenix. We're seeing sappers moving around our entire perimeter. It's like they've read our defensive manual and designed countermeasures for everything. The comment struck at the heart of Nicole's growing concerns about the operation. The enemy's tactical knowledge went beyond simple preparation or luck. They were demonstrating understanding of American special operations procedures that suggested access to classified training materials and operational doctrines. All stations, this is Steele. General Nathaniel Pemberton's voice carried across the tactical frequency with obvious frustration. We're implementing emergency extraction protocols. All teams prepare for immediate withdrawal under covering fire. Nicole recognized the significance of the general's decision. Emergency extraction protocols were used only when an operation faced complete failure with unacceptable casualty projections. Someone at the highest levels of command had concluded that Operation Sandviper could not be salvaged. But as she surveyed the tactical situation through her scope, Nicole realized that emergency extraction protocols depended on capabilities that simply no longer existed. The enemy had systematically eliminated every standard option for extracting the SEAL teams, leaving them trapped in a killing ground designed specifically to annihilate American Special Operations Forces. The greatest test of her skills as a sniper was about to begin, and failure meant watching 287 of America's finest warriors die in the unforgiving heat of the Somali desert. The thunderous roar of approaching Chinook helicopters announced the arrival of the emergency extraction force, but Nicole could already see through her scope that the rescue attempt was flying into a carefully prepared killing field. Surface-to-air missile teams had positioned themselves along every conceivable approach route, their launchers trained skyward with deadly patience. Rescue 1, this is Phoenix. Nicole transmitted urgently as the lead helicopter crested the ridgeline. You are flying into a coordinated air defense network. Multiple SAM sites active across all approach vectors. Phoenix, Rescue 1, we copy your warning, but we have our orders. These people are coming home. The pilot's determination was admirable, but Nicole watched helplessly as the first shoulder-fired missile streaked upward from a concealed position near the village center. The Chinook's defensive systems activated automatically, deploying chaff and flares while executing evasive maneuvers. But the second and third missiles followed in rapid succession. Rescue 1 is hit. We're going down. The pilot's voice dissolved into static as the massive helicopter lost power and began auto-rotating toward a catastrophic impact with the rocky terrain below. Nicole's scope tracked the aircraft's descent while she simultaneously acquired targets among the missile teams responsible for the shootdown. Her first shot eliminated the launcher operator who had fired the killing blow, but the damage was already done. 47 additional rescue personnel were now added to the casualty count. All stations, this is Iron Lady. Colonel Rebecca Steele's voice carried barely contained fury. Rescue operations are suspended until we can establish air superiority. All teams maintain defensive positions. The order essentially condemned the trapped SEAL teams to fight until their ammunition ran out or enemy forces overran their positions. Nicole understood that conventional military doctrine offered no solutions for the tactical nightmare unfolding below, but she also recognized that unconventional options might still exist. Iron Lady Phoenix, request permission to implement independent supporting actions. The silence that followed Nicole's transmission stretched long enough that she wondered if her radio had malfunctioned. When Colonel Steele finally responded, her voice carried the weight of someone authorizing actions that violated every standard protocol. Phoenix, you have operational discretion to implement any actions consistent with force protection. Understand that you will be operating without support. Nicole recognized the carefully worded authorization for what it represented. Colonel Steele was giving her permission to violate orders if necessary while maintaining plausible deniability for the command structure. It was the kind of arrangement that allowed senior officers to achieve necessary results without officially endorsing unauthorized actions. Copy, Iron Lady. Phoenix is implementing independent operations. Nicole began calculating a plan that would require her to abandon her Overwatch position and move closer to the battlefield. The mathematics were daunting. 287 trapped SEALs faced overwhelming enemy forces across multiple positions, with ammunition running low and no conventional extraction options available. Tank Phoenix, I need you to coordinate simultaneous movement by all teams toward the northern riverbed complex. It's the only terrain feature that offers concealment for large-scale movement. Master Chief Dubois understood immediately that Nicole was proposing something far beyond standard sniper support operations. Phoenix, that's 3 kilometers of movement across open ground under constant enemy observation. What kind of support can you provide? Nicole was already breaking down her hide site and preparing her equipment for movement. Tank, I'm relocating to provide close-range support. You'll have precision fire coverage, but it's going to require trust and perfect timing. The plan forming in Nicole's mind violated every principle of sniper employment. Instead of maintaining distance and concealment, she would move to positions that offered maximum effectiveness at minimum range. It was tactically insane, but conventional tactics had already proven inadequate. Phoenix, this is Hawk. Lieutenant Commander Caldwell's voice reflected deep concern. You're talking about abandoning your position of advantage to operate in the kill zone with us. That's suicide. Nicole secured her equipment and prepared to begin the dangerous movement down the ridge toward the valley floor. Hawk, staying in position and watching you all die is also unacceptable. Sometimes the impossible choice is the only choice. As she began her descent, Nicole could hear the enemy assault beginning with coordinated mortar fire across all American positions. The mathematical precision of the bombardment confirmed her suspicions about intelligence leaks within the command structure, but that analysis would have to wait for post-mission evaluation. All stations, Phoenix. Enemy assault commencing with indirect fire. Prepare for ground assault to follow in approximately 10 minutes. Nicole moved with the swift efficiency of someone who had spent years perfecting movement techniques in hostile territory. Each step was calculated to minimize noise and visual signature while maintaining maximum speed toward her objective. The rocky terrain offered concealment, but it also channeled her movement along predictable routes that enemy observers might anticipate. Doc, Phoenix, what's your ammunition status? She transmitted while navigating a particularly treacherous section of loose shale. Phoenix, we're down to less than 20% across all weapon systems. If this assault develops as anticipated, we'll be fighting with whatever we can scavenge from enemy casualties. The report from the medical team reflected similar situations across all SEAL positions. Extended combat against overwhelming odds had depleted ammunition reserves that were never intended to sustain this level of engagement. Nicole's plan would have to account for teams operating with severely limited firepower. Ghost Phoenix, can your explosives team create diversionary charges along the enemy's expected assault routes? Petty Officer Xavier Monroe's response carried grim professionalism. Phoenix, we've got enough charges left for one major diversion, but placement will require movement under fire. Not sure we can get into position without taking casualties. Nicole reached a position approximately 1,000 meters from the nearest SEAL team, where she could see individual fighters moving through the village streets. The reduced range would allow more precise target identification and faster engagement of multiple threats, but it also meant operating within effective range of enemy small arms fire. Ghost, hold on the diversionary charges. I'll provide covering fire for your movement when the assault begins. She established a hasty firing position among a cluster of boulders that provided both concealment and clear fields of fire toward the village. Through her scope, she could observe enemy assault teams forming up in the narrow alleyways, their leaders coordinating timing and objectives with hand signals. Viper Phoenix, I count 47 enemy fighters moving toward your position from the southwest. They're using the dry stream for concealment, but I have overwatch on their route. First Sergeant Valentina Ramirez acknowledged the intelligence while her reconnaissance team prepared their final defensive positions. Phoenix, we can hear them moving, but we can't see them through the vegetation. We're going to need precise fire direction. Nicole began target identification among the approaching enemy force, prioritizing leaders and heavy weapons operators who could cause maximum damage to the trapped reconnaissance team. At 800 meters, her shots would be devastatingly effective, but she would also become a priority target for every enemy fighter who observed her muzzle flashes. Viper, stand by for supporting fire. First target is the assault team leader, center of the formation. The Barrett's familiar recoil slammed into Nicole's shoulder as the heavy rifle sent its message across the intervening distance. The enemy assault team leader collapsed, immediately causing confusion and hesitation among his subordinates. Nicole worked the bolt action smoothly, acquiring her second target before the enemy could react to the unexpected precision fire. Target eliminated, shifting to heavy weapons operator on the right flank. Her second shot removed the machine gunner who had been preparing to establish supporting fire for the assault. The enemy formation began seeking cover, their coordinated advance dissolving into scattered individual movements as they tried to identify the source of the precision fire. Phoenix, this is Diesel. Staff Sergeant Andre Coleman transmitted from his communications position. I'm intercepting enemy radio traffic indicating they're redeploying assets to hunt for our sniper. You're about to become very popular. Nicole had anticipated the enemy response to her changed position and tactics. By abandoning her concealed overwatch site, she had gained tactical effectiveness at the cost of operational security. Enemy forces would now prioritize eliminating her before continuing their assault on the trapped SEAL teams. Copy Diesel, monitor their coordination frequencies, and provide early warning if they locate my position. Through her scope, Nicole could see enemy fighters beginning systematic searches of the terrain where her muzzle flashes had been observed. Their training was evident in the methodical way they quartered the ground, using proper search techniques to identify concealed positions. Tank Phoenix, you need to begin your movement toward the riverbed complex now. I can suppress the hunters for a limited time, but they're going to find me eventually. Master Chief Dubois understood that Nicole was essentially sacrificing herself to create an opportunity for the larger force. Phoenix, what's your extraction plan after we move? Nicole acquired another target through her scope, an enemy spotter who was directing the search teams toward her general area. Tank, my extraction plan is to keep shooting until everyone else is clear. The transmission carried no melodrama or false heroics, simply the matter-of-fact assessment of someone who had calculated acceptable risk and found it wanting. Nicole had determined that her individual survival was less important than the lives of 287 trapped warriors, and she was prepared to act on that calculation. Phoenix, negative. Tank replied immediately. We don't leave people behind. If you're staying, we're all staying. Nicole's third shot eliminated the enemy spotter, buying additional time before her position would be precisely located. Tank, that's exactly the kind of thinking that got us into this situation. Sometimes tactical withdrawal requires leaving assets behind. As she worked to identify her next target, Nicole noticed increased activity around the enemy command post. Additional vehicles were arriving, and radio antennas were being repositioned to improve communications coverage. Someone was coordinating a major escalation of the engagement. Eagle Eye Phoenix, the enemy command post is receiving significant reinforcements. I count at least 6 additional vehicles and what appears to be senior leadership arriving on site. Captain Angela Singh's response carried urgent concern. Phoenix, can you identify the new arrivals? Nicole adjusted her scope toward the command building, where she could observe well-dressed individuals conferring with local Al-Shabaab commanders. The distance made positive identification impossible, but the deference shown by the local forces suggested that very senior leadership had arrived to personally oversee the destruction of the American forces. Eagle Eye, I see what appears to be foreign advisors or senior commanders, but positive identification is impossible at this range. As she transmitted her report, Nicole realized that someone was moving through the rocks approximately 50 meters to her left. The enemy search teams had triangulated her position with dangerous accuracy, and she was about to face direct assault by forces specifically tasked with eliminating her. All stations, Phoenix, enemy forces have located my position, beginning final phase of supporting operations. Nicole turned her rifle toward the approaching threats, abandoning her Overwatch mission to fight for immediate survival. The mathematics had changed again, but her commitment to the trapped SEAL teams remained absolute. If she was going to die in the rocks of Somalia, she would take as many enemies with her as possible. The first enemy fighter appeared among the rocks 30 meters to Nicole's left, moving with the careful deliberation of someone who understood he was hunting a trained killer. Nicole's transition from precision sniper to close-quarters combatant happened in milliseconds, her training adapting seamlessly to the changed tactical environment. She pivoted the Barrett toward the approaching threat, but at this range the heavy rifle was unwieldy for rapid engagement. Nicole drew her sidearm, a Sig Sauer P320 that had been modified for suppressed fire, and put 3 rounds center mass into the enemy fighter before he could raise his AK-47. Phoenix to all stations, she transmitted while scanning for additional threats. I'm engaged in close combat. Continue movement toward extraction point. Do not wait for my support. 2 more enemy fighters emerged from concealment, approaching her position from different angles in a coordinated assault. Nicole rolled behind a larger boulder as automatic weapons fire shattered the rocks around her previous position, granite chips stinging her face as she sought better cover. Tank Phoenix, sit rep on team movement. Master Chief Dubois responded while directing his teams toward the riverbed complex. Phoenix, we've got Charlie and Delta teams moving, but Foxtrot is pinned down by heavy machine gun fire from the mosque complex. They can't break contact. Nicole assessed her immediate tactical situation while processing the information about Foxtrot team. 3 enemy fighters were maneuvering to flank her position, forcing her to engage them before she could provide supporting fire for the trapped SEAL team. The mathematics of combat had become brutally simple. Eliminate immediate threats, or die trying. She identified the lead enemy fighter's position by observing his muzzle flashes, calculated his likely movement pattern, and prepared an ambush. When he appeared around the edge of her covering boulder, Nicole's suppressed pistol sent him tumbling backward with 3 precise shots to the chest. Foxtrot, Phoenix, what's your exact position relative to the mosque complex? Petty Officer First Class Marcus Stone's voice carried the strain of someone under intense fire. Phoenix, we're approximately 200 meters southeast of the main building, taking fire from multiple positions in the minaret and surrounding structures. Nicole knew the mosque complex from her earlier reconnaissance. The building offered excellent defensive positions and overlapping fields of fire that would make dislodging enemy fighters extremely difficult. Conventional assault tactics would require overwhelming firepower that the trapped SEALs simply didn't possess. Foxtrot, can you mark your position with colored smoke? Phoenix, we're down to emergency signaling devices only. Don't want to waste them unless absolutely necessary. The remaining 2 enemy fighters hunting Nicole had repositioned themselves to attack from different angles, forcing her to divide her attention between immediate survival and supporting the trapped teams. She could hear their movements in the rocks, the subtle sounds of equipment and breathing that revealed their approximate positions. Nicole made a tactical decision that would have horrified her instructors at sniper school. She abandoned her concealed position and moved aggressively toward one of the enemy fighters, using speed and surprise to compensate for her disadvantageous position. The enemy fighter was so focused on the position where he expected to find her that Nicole's sudden appearance from an entirely different direction caught him completely off guard. Her knife found his throat before he could bring his weapon to bear, eliminating the threat without alerting his companions to her new position. Foxtrot, Phoenix. I'm going to provide suppressive fire on the mosque complex. When I engage, you move immediately toward the riverbed. Don't stop, don't look back, just run. Nicole retrieved the Barrett from her previous position and began calculating shots into the mosque complex from her current location. The range was approximately 200 meters, well within her effective engagement envelope, but the targets would be partially concealed behind stone walls and wooden barriers. Her first shot shattered a window where she had observed muzzle flashes, hopefully eliminating or suppressing the machine gun position that had been pinning down Foxtrot team. The massive .50 caliber round punched through the building's ancient masonry-like paper, sending debris cascading into the street below. Foxtrot, move now! Nicole worked the bolt action and acquired her second target, another firing position in the mosque's eastern wall. The enemy fighter disappeared in a cloud of stone dust and splintered wood as her round found its mark. Through her scope, she could see Foxtrot team beginning their sprint toward the riverbed, finally free from the devastating fire that had trapped them. Phoenix, this is Ghost, came Xavier Monroe's voice from his explosives team position. We're preparing to execute the diversionary charges. Can you suppress enemy response teams when they investigate the explosions? Nicole was still dealing with the remaining enemy fighter who had been hunting her, but Ghost's diversionary plan offered an opportunity to buy precious time for all the SEAL teams to reach the extraction point. Ghost, execute your plan. I'll provide what support I can. The final enemy hunter appeared suddenly from behind a rock formation, his assault rifle already trained on Nicole's position. She dove sideways as his first burst shattered the air where she had been standing, rolling behind inadequate cover as he adjusted his aim for a killing shot. Nicole's combat experience took over as she calculated angles and timing. The enemy fighter was positioned where he could maintain fire superiority, but his eagerness to finish her had exposed him to a counterattack. She waited until he paused to reload, then emerged from cover with her sidearm ready. The engagement lasted less than 3 seconds. Both fighters fired simultaneously, Nicole's suppressed pistol competing with the enemy's AK-47 in a deadly race measured in milliseconds. The enemy fighter's rounds sparked off the rocks around Nicole's position, while her shots found their intended target, dropping him among the scattered boulders. Phoenix to all stations, immediate threats eliminated, resuming Overwatch support. Nicole reclaimed her sniper rifle and began scanning for targets around the SEAL team positions, but her brief close-quarters battle had allowed enemy forces to reposition themselves advantageously. Machine gun teams had established new firing positions, and assault teams were moving to intercept the American withdrawal routes. Tank, Phoenix. Enemy forces are repositioning to block your movement routes. I count at least 60 fighters moving to establish ambush positions along the riverbed. Master Chief Dubois understood the implications immediately. Phoenix, if they get into position before we reach the riverbed, we'll be caught in the open with no cover. Nicole began engaging the enemy repositioning teams with rapid precision fire, but the targets were numerous and well-trained in movement techniques. For every enemy fighter she eliminated, others continued advancing toward positions that would trap the withdrawing SEALs in deadly crossfire. All teams, this is Phoenix. You need to accelerate your movement. I can slow them down, but I can't stop them all. The Barrett thundered repeatedly as Nicole worked to thin the enemy forces racing to establish blocking positions. Her shots were effective, but the sheer number of targets threatened to overwhelm her ability to provide adequate suppression. Phoenix, this is Diesel. Staff Sergeant Coleman transmitted from his communications position. I'm monitoring enemy radio traffic. They're coordinating a major assault designed to catch our teams in the open during withdrawal. Nicole had suspected as much from observing enemy movement patterns. Someone with detailed knowledge of American tactical doctrine was coordinating the Al-Shabaab response, turning every standard procedure against the forces attempting to execute them. Diesel, can you intercept their coordination frequencies and create confusion? Coleman's electronic warfare training included techniques for disrupting enemy communications, but implementing them required equipment and time that might not be available in their current tactical situation. Phoenix, I can try, but it'll mean going offline with our own communications while I work. We'd be operating blind for at least 10 minutes. Nicole calculated the trade-offs while engaging another enemy machine gun team that was threatening Charlie Team's movement. 10 minutes without communications was an eternity in combat, but it might be worth the risk if it prevented coordinated enemy action against the withdrawing teams. Diesel, execute communication disruption now. All teams acknowledge and prepare for communications blackout. A chorus of acknowledgements came across the radio net as each SEAL team prepared to operate independently without central coordination. It was a desperate measure that abandoned one of the primary advantages of modern military forces, but conventional advantages had already proven inadequate against this enemy. Communications blackout commencing in 3, 2, 1. The radio net fell silent as Coleman began his electronic warfare mission, leaving Nicole alone with her thoughts and the constant thunder of her rifle as she continued engaging targets across the battlefield. Without radio contact, she would have to make tactical decisions based solely on visual observation and her understanding of SEAL team movement patterns. Through her scope, she watched Charlie team reach the relative safety of the riverbed while Delta team remained exposed on open ground, still several hundred meters from cover. Enemy assault teams were closing on their position, threatening to overwhelm them before they could reach the extraction point. Nicole shifted her fire to support Delta team, her shots falling among the enemy fighters like precisely placed thunderbolts. Each round eliminated or suppressed a threat, but the enemy's numerical advantage was becoming overwhelming despite her efforts. "Come on," she whispered to herself while working the bolt action for what felt like the 100th time. "Just a little farther." Delta team's point man suddenly stumbled and fell, hit by enemy fire from a concealed position that Nicole hadn't identified. The team immediately moved to recover their wounded teammate, but their exposed position made them vulnerable to the converging assault teams. Nicole acquired the enemy position that had wounded the SEAL operator, a sniper hidden among the ruins of a collapsed building. At 650 meters, the shot required perfect compensation for wind and elevation, but she had no choice except to engage. The Barrett's recoil hammered into her shoulder as the heavy round crossed the intervening distance in less than 2 seconds. Through her scope, she watched the enemy sniper's position disintegrate in a shower of debris and dust, eliminating the threat to Delta team's wounded member. But as she chambered another round, Nicole realized that her ammunition supply was becoming critically low. She had perhaps 20 rounds remaining, barely enough to support the ongoing extraction if all teams encountered heavy resistance. The mathematical reality was becoming undeniable. Too many enemies, too many SEAL teams still exposed, and insufficient ammunition to suppress all threats until everyone reached safety. Nicole would have to choose which teams received supporting fire and which would face the enemy alone. As she prepared to make those impossible choices, an unexpected transmission broke through the communications blackout. A new voice, speaking with unmistakable authority and fury. "Phoenix, this is actual. Authorization code Charlie-77 Alpha. Immediate fire mission follows." Nicole recognized the voice of Lieutenant General Patricia Morrison, one of the most senior officers in Special Operations Command. Somehow, someone at the highest levels of military leadership had decided to intervene directly in the tactical situation, and Nicole was about to become the instrument of that intervention. The authorization code Lieutenant General Patricia Morrison had transmitted carried implications that Nicole understood immediately. Charlie-77 Alpha designated unrestricted engagement authority, the kind of operational clearance typically reserved for strategic targets of the highest priority. Someone at the Pentagon had decided that saving the trapped SEAL teams justified any level of escalation. Phoenix, actual. Grid coordinates follow for priority target engagement. 7,734,521, 7,734,522, 7,734,523. Eliminate all structures and personnel within designated kill zones. No restrictions on collateral damage. Nicole's scope swept across the coordinates Morrison had provided, identifying the enemy command post and 2 adjacent buildings that housed communication equipment and ammunition storage. The general was authorizing her to level the entire command structure of the Al-Shabaab operation, regardless of civilian casualties or diplomatic consequences. Actual Phoenix, confirm unrestricted engagement on provided coordinates. What assets are available for fire support? Morrison's response carried the weight of someone who had bypassed multiple levels of command authority to implement direct action. Phoenix, Predator drone is inbound your position with Hellfire missiles. You are cleared to designate targets for immediate engagement. Nicole had never operated with drone support during a ground engagement, but her training included target designation procedures for air-delivered ordnance. The technology would allow her to eliminate multiple targets simultaneously rather than engaging them sequentially with her rifle. Actual Phoenix. I need 5 minutes to complete target designation and ensure friendly forces are clear of the impact zones. Through her scope, Nicole observed the enemy command post, where senior leaders continued coordinating the assault against the withdrawing SEAL teams. The building housed not only Al-Shabaab commanders, but also the foreign advisors whose presence suggested intelligence cooperation that extended far beyond simple tactical support. Tank Phoenix. Break communication silence immediately. Emergency coordination required. Master Chief Dubois responded within seconds, his voice tight with the strain of conducting withdrawal operations under intense fire. Phoenix, tank. What's the situation? Nicole began calculating blast radii and potential fragmentation patterns for the incoming missile strikes. Tank, I'm about to eliminate the enemy command structure with drone strikes. I need all teams to clear the northern grid squares within 4 minutes. Phoenix, that's going to require teams to move through open ground under direct observation. We'll take casualties crossing those areas. Nicole understood Tank's concern, but the mathematical exchange favored accepting limited casualties during movement rather than facing systematic annihilation from coordinated enemy action. Tank, the alternative is fighting an enemy force that knows exactly what you're going to do before you do it. The command structure has to be eliminated. As Nicole spoke, she was already beginning target designation procedures, using her scope's laser designator to paint the primary command building for the incoming drone. The invisible infrared marker would guide the Hellfire missile to its target with precision measured in inches rather than feet. Viper, Phoenix. What's your team's position relative to grid square 7,734,521? First Sergeant Valentina Ramirez responded while directing her reconnaissance team through the broken terrain near the village outskirts. Phoenix, we're approximately 400 meters south of that grid. Is that the target area? Nicole confirmed Valentina's position while designating the second target building for drone engagement. Viper, affirmative. Move your team to minimum safe distance. Missile impact in 3 minutes. Through her scope, Nicole could observe enemy forces continuing their systematic assault on SEAL positions, their coordination and timing reflecting the kind of tactical sophistication that required real-time command and control. Eliminating the command structure would disrupt their ability to coordinate complex operations, potentially creating chaos that the American forces could exploit. Ghost Phoenix, can your explosives team create additional diversionary explosions timed to coincide with the missile strikes? Xavier Monroe's response reflected his understanding of the tactical opportunity Nicole was creating. Phoenix, affirmative. We can detonate our remaining charges simultaneously with your strikes. Should create maximum confusion among enemy forces. Nicole completed target designation for the third building, an ammunition storage facility whose destruction would eliminate enemy resupply capabilities and potentially create secondary explosions that would further disrupt their operations. All stations Phoenix, missile strikes commencing in 90 seconds. All teams seek maximum cover and prepare to exploit the resulting confusion. The Predator drone was invisible at its operating altitude, but Nicole could hear the distinctive whistle of incoming missiles as they descended toward their designated targets. She pressed herself against the rocky ground and covered her ears, preparing for the devastating impacts that would reshape the tactical battlefield. The first Hellfire missile struck the command post with surgical precision, the building's ancient masonry offering no resistance to modern military explosives. The structure collapsed in a thunderous roar of falling stone and twisted metal, instantly eliminating the coordinated threat to American operations. The second missile found the communications facility, destroying antenna arrays and electronic equipment in a brilliant flash of high explosives and sparking electronics. Enemy forces throughout the village were suddenly isolated from central coordination, forced to operate independently without tactical direction. The third impact triggered secondary explosions as stored ammunition detonated in a series of rolling thunderclaps that shattered windows throughout the village. Enemy fighters who had been advancing toward American positions suddenly found themselves under attack from their own exploding ordnance. Ghost, execute your charges now. Nicole transmitted as she watched the enemy force structure disintegrating under the multiple explosions. Xavier's diversionary charges added to the chaos, creating false signals of American assault teams operating throughout the village. Enemy forces began responding to imaginary threats, their movements becoming confused and uncoordinated as they lost the central command that had made them so effective. All teams, Phoenix. Enemy command structure is eliminated. Execute extraction now while they're disorganized. Nicole could see through her scope that the mathematical balance of the engagement had shifted dramatically. Instead of facing coordinated opposition, the SEAL teams now confronted scattered enemy elements operating without central direction or tactical coordination. Tank Phoenix, you have clear movement corridors opening toward the extraction point. Enemy resistance is fragmenting. Master Chief Dubois immediately capitalized on the opportunity Nicole had created. All teams, this is Tank. Move to extraction point Alpha immediately. Mutual support. Watch your sectors, but do not stop for anything. Nicole provided overwatch as Charlie team emerged from the riverbed and began their final sprint toward the extraction point. Enemy fire continued, but it lacked the devastating coordination that had made previous movement attempts suicidal. Foxtrot, Phoenix. You have 2 enemy fighters attempting to establish blocking positions on your route. Engaging now. Nicole's rifle thundered twice in rapid succession, eliminating the enemy fighters before they could establish effective positions. Her ammunition was now critically low, perhaps 6 rounds remaining, but the tactical situation had changed enough that precise conservation might be possible. Doc, Phoenix. How many wounded do you need assistance moving? Mason Flanagan's medical team had been treating casualties throughout the engagement, but moving wounded personnel across difficult terrain required additional support that might not be available. Phoenix, I've got 4 wounded who can move independently and 3 who need assistance. We're going to need help carrying the critical cases. Nicole watched through her scope as other SEAL teams began converging on Doc's position to assist with casualty evacuation. The camaraderie and mutual support that defined elite military units was evident, even under the most extreme circumstances. Ranger, Phoenix. What's your team's ammunition status? Petty Officer Trevor Walsh responded from his communications position, where he had been supporting Diesel's electronic warfare operations. Phoenix were down to emergency reserves only, maybe 10 magazines total across the entire team. The ammunition shortage was critical, but Nicole calculated that the remaining distance to the extraction point could be covered with minimal engagement if the teams moved quickly, while enemy forces remained disorganized. Diesel Phoenix, how long until you can restore our communications? Staff Sergeant Andre Coleman had been working throughout the engagement to disrupt enemy coordination, but Nicole needed him to re-establish American communication capabilities for the final extraction phase. Phoenix, I can bring our net back online immediately. Enemy communications are still disrupted, so we should have clear frequencies. Nicole watched as the first SEAL teams reached the extraction point, a defensible position among rocky outcroppings that offered cover and clear fields of fire. The mathematical equation was finally shifting in favor of the American forces. All stations, communications net is active. Report status and ammunition immediately. A chorus of responses flooded the radio as teams reported their positions, casualties, and remaining combat capabilities. The overall picture was grim but survivable. Heavy casualties, critical ammunition shortages, but most personnel were mobile and approaching the extraction point. Phoenix, this is Iron Lady. Colonel Rebecca Steele's voice carried relief and concern in equal measure. Extraction helicopters are inbound, but we need confirmation that the landing zone is secure. Nicole swept her scope across the extraction point and surrounding terrain, identifying potential threats to the incoming aircraft. Enemy forces were still present throughout the area, but their disorganized state made coordinated anti-aircraft fire unlikely. Iron Lady Phoenix. Landing zone appears secure, but recommend armed escort for extraction aircraft. Scattered enemy forces remain active throughout the area. As she spoke, Nicole noticed movement near the ruins of the destroyed command post. Someone was emerging from what appeared to be an underground bunker, suggesting that at least some enemy leadership had survived the missile strikes. All stations, Phoenix. I have surviving enemy personnel emerging from concealed positions near the destroyed command post. They appear to be senior leadership attempting to re-establish command and control. The figures Nicole observed through her scope were well-dressed and moved with obvious authority as they began attempting to coordinate the scattered al-Shabaab forces. Their survival represented a continued threat to the extraction operation and future American operations in the region. "Phoenix, this is Actual," came Lieutenant General Morrison's voice again. "Are you able to engage the surviving leadership?" Nicole calculated the range at approximately 800 meters, near the maximum effective range of her rifle under current conditions. With only 6 rounds remaining, she would have perhaps 2 opportunities to eliminate targets before her ammunition was completely exhausted. "Actual, Phoenix, I can engage, but ammunition is critically low. 2 shots maximum before I'm dry." Morrison's response carried the weight of strategic decision-making that extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. "Phoenix, take the shots. Those individuals represent intelligence assets that cannot be allowed to escape." Nicole settled into her final firing position, knowing that these would likely be her last shots of the engagement. Through her scope, she could identify 2 primary targets among the enemy leadership, both involved in directing the attempted reorganization of al-Shabaab forces. The first shot crossed nearly 3 kilometers of desert air, striking the senior al-Shabaab commander as he attempted to coordinate scattered elements of his force. The second found his foreign advisor, eliminating the intelligence link that had made the sophisticated ambush possible. "Actual, Phoenix, targets eliminated. I am now out of ammunition." With her rifle empty and her immediate tactical value exhausted, Nicole began preparing for her own extraction from the ridge position she had occupied for over 24 hours. The mission was approaching completion, but the personal cost would require careful assessment once all personnel were safe. The distant thunder of approaching helicopters announced the arrival of the extraction force, but Nicole understood that her own journey to safety had only begun. With her rifle empty and 3 kilometers of hostile terrain between her position and the extraction point, she faced the most dangerous phase of an already perilous mission. "Phoenix, this is Iron Lady." Colonel Rebecca Steele transmitted as the rescue helicopters appeared on the horizon. "Extraction birds are inbound, but they're reporting sporadic ground fire. What's your status for movement to the pickup zone?" Nicole began breaking down her sniper position, securing equipment and preparing for rapid movement across terrain she had studied intensively but never traversed on foot. The rocky outcroppings that had provided excellent concealment for observation now represented obstacles that would slow her progress towards safety. "Iron Lady, Phoenix, I'm beginning movement to extraction point now. Ammunition is exhausted, so I'll be relying on speed and concealment rather than firepower." As she shouldered her equipment and began the treacherous descent from the ridge, Nicole could observe the SEAL teams converging on the extraction point through her binoculars. Despite heavy casualties and equipment losses, their movement remained disciplined and coordinated, testament to training that functioned even under the most extreme circumstances. "Tank, Phoenix, I'm observing your team's approach to the extraction point. What's your casualty count?" Master Chief Felix Dubois coordinated the final consolidation while establishing defensive positions around the landing zone. "Phoenix, we've got 23 wounded, 7 critical. Doc's doing everything possible, but we need immediate medical evacuation for the critical cases." Nicole navigated a particularly steep section of the ridge while processing the casualty figures. 23 wounded out of 287 deployed personnel represented a catastrophic engagement by any measure. But it could have been far worse without the intervention that had disrupted enemy coordination. "Doc, Phoenix, do you have sufficient medical supplies to stabilize the critical cases for helicopter transport?" Mason Flanagan responded while treating multiple casualties simultaneously, his medical training pushed to its absolute limits. "Phoenix, we're using field expedients for most procedures. I've got 3 patients who need immediate surgical intervention that I can't provide in the field." Nicole reached the bottom of the ridge and began moving across the valley floor toward the extraction point. The terrain offered limited concealment, forcing her to rely on speed and the confusion created by the earlier missile strikes to avoid detection by remaining enemy forces. "Viper, Phoenix, what's the security situation around the extraction point perimeter?" First Sergeant Valentina Ramirez had established observation posts covering all approaches to the landing zone, but her reconnaissance team was operating with severely limited ammunition and equipment. "Phoenix, we've got scattered enemy forces still active throughout the area, but they appear disorganized and operating independently. No coordinated assault capability observed. Nicole crossed a dry stream that offered temporary concealment while she assessed the remaining distance to the extraction point. Approximately 2 kilometers remained, but the terrain ahead included several open areas where she would be exposed to observation and potential enemy fire. Ghost Phoenix, can you provide any diversionary explosions to mask my movement across the open ground? Xavier Monroe's explosives team had expended most of their charges during the earlier diversions, but they might have sufficient materials remaining to create limited distractions. Phoenix, I've got 1 smoke charge and 2 flashbangs remaining. Not much, but I can create some confusion if you need it. Nicole studied the route ahead, identifying the most dangerous exposure areas where enemy forces might observe her movement. The timing would have to be perfect to coordinate diversions with her transit across the vulnerable terrain. Ghost, prepare to execute diversions on my signal. I'll need covering smoke in Sector 7734518 in approximately 8 minutes. As she continued her movement toward the extraction point, Nicole could hear the distinctive rotor noise of the approaching helicopters growing louder. The pilots would be operating under extreme stress, knowing that every second spent on the ground increased their vulnerability to enemy fire. Extraction 1, this is Phoenix, she transmitted to the lead helicopter pilot. Be advised that scattered enemy forces remain active throughout the area. Recommend combat landing procedures and minimal ground time. Captain Michael Wright acknowledged from the cockpit of the lead Chinook, his voice steady despite the challenging operational environment. Phoenix, Extraction 1, we're configured for hot extraction with door gunners active. What's the threat assessment for small arms fire? Nicole could observe muzzle flashes from several positions around the village, where enemy fighters continued sporadic resistance despite the loss of central coordination. Extraction 1, expect small arms fire from multiple positions, but no evidence of coordinated anti-aircraft capabilities. She reached another checkpoint in her movement toward the extraction point, a cluster of abandoned vehicles that provided temporary cover while she assessed the next leg of her journey. Through her binoculars, she could observe the SEAL teams establishing final defensive positions as the helicopters approached for landing. Diesel, Phoenix. Are enemy communications still disrupted? Staff Sergeant Andre Coleman monitored electronic signals while preparing his equipment for extraction. Phoenix. Enemy radio traffic remains fragmented and uncoordinated. They're trying to re-establish command and control, but it's going to take time. Nicole resumed her movement across increasingly difficult terrain, rocky ground that challenged her footing while providing minimal concealment from potential observers. Each step had to be calculated for both speed and stealth, a balance that became more critical as she approached areas of greater enemy activity. Ranger, Phoenix. What's the ammunition situation among the teams at the extraction point? Petty Officer Trevor Walsh coordinated supply redistribution among the SEAL teams, ensuring that defensive positions had adequate firepower to protect the landing zone. Phoenix, we're pooling remaining ammunition to establish strong points around the perimeter. Maybe 15 minutes of sustained fire capability if we're attacked during extraction. The first helicopter began its approach to the landing zone, door gunners scanning for threats while the pilot maintained a steep descent profile to minimize exposure time. Nicole could observe the precision and professionalism of the aircrew despite the hostile environment. All stations, First Bird is inbound. Wounded personnel prepare for immediate loading. Nicole reached the point where she would need Ghost's diversionary smoke to mask her movement across the final open area. The timing was critical, as the helicopter's arrival would focus enemy attention on the extraction point. Ghost, execute smoke diversion now. Xavier's smoke charge detonated in Sector 7,734,518, creating a dense cloud that obscured enemy observation of Nicole's route across the exposed ground. She sprinted through the concealment, covering 200 meters of dangerous terrain in less than 60 seconds. The first Chinook touched down at the extraction point, its ramp lowering immediately as medical personnel rushed to load the most critically wounded SEAL operators. Door gunners provided suppressive fire against enemy positions that attempted to engage the vulnerable aircraft. Loading critical casualties now, Doc transmitted while directing the movement of wounded personnel into the helicopter. Need 2 more minutes for complete medical evacuation. Nicole could see enemy fighters beginning to coordinate attacks against the extraction operation, their movement suggesting that some level of command and control was being re-established despite the earlier disruption. Tank Phoenix. Enemy forces are beginning to coordinate against the extraction. You may face concentrated fire on subsequent helicopter operations. Master Chief Dubois understood the implications while coordinating defensive fire around the landing zone. Phoenix, we're seeing the same thing. How much longer until you reach our position? Nicole calculated her remaining distance at approximately 800 meters, achievable in 10 minutes if she maintained her current pace across the challenging terrain. Tank, 10 minutes to your position. Can you maintain security of the landing zone for that duration? The second helicopter began its approach as the first lifted off with its cargo of wounded personnel. Enemy fire intensified as Al-Shabaab fighters attempted to bring down the departing aircraft with small arms and rocket-propelled grenades. Taking fire from multiple positions, reported the pilot of Extraction 2 as his aircraft maneuvered to avoid enemy rockets. Need immediate suppression of enemy fire. SEAL teams around the perimeter responded with coordinated fire against the enemy positions, their limited ammunition focused on protecting the extraction operation. Nicole could observe the effectiveness of their suppressive fire despite resource constraints. Phoenix, this is Eagle Eye, came Captain Angela Singh's voice from the operations center. Satellite imagery shows approximately 40 enemy fighters converging on the extraction point from the eastern approaches. Nicole verified the intelligence through her binoculars, confirming that enemy reinforcements were indeed approaching the landing zone. Their arrival would significantly complicate the extraction of remaining personnel. Eagle Eye Phoenix confirmed enemy reinforcements approaching from the east. They'll arrive at the extraction point in approximately 15 minutes. Colonel Steele's voice cut through the tactical frequency with obvious concern. Phoenix, can the extraction be completed before enemy reinforcements arrive? Nicole calculated helicopter capacity, loading times, and the number of personnel still requiring evacuation. The mathematics were challenging but potentially achievable with perfect execution. Iron Lady, marginal. It's going to require maximum efficiency and some luck. As the second helicopter touched down and began loading personnel, Nicole covered the final distance to the extraction point at a sprint. Her legs burned from the extended movement across difficult terrain, but the sight of her fellow Americans provided motivation for the final push. Phoenix approaching perimeter from the southwest, she transmitted while closing the last 200 meters to safety. Tank positioned security personnel to provide covering fire for Nicole's final approach, recognizing that her arrival would complete the personnel accountability that was essential for mission completion. Good to see you, Phoenix. Tank called as Nicole reached the defensive perimeter. Thought we might have to leave without our guardian angel. Nicole collapsed behind the rocky barrier that provided cover from enemy fire, her equipment and body pushed to their absolute limits after more than 24 hours of continuous operations. Tank, I wouldn't miss the ride home. Besides, someone needs to explain to the brass how a routine arms interdiction turned into the largest firefight since Mogadishu. As the third helicopter began its approach, Nicole finally allowed herself to consider the broader implications of Operation Sandviper. The intelligence breach that had enabled the sophisticated ambush, the foreign advisors coordinating Al-Shabaab operations, and the strategic decisions that had nearly resulted in catastrophic American losses. Phoenix, this is actual, came Lieutenant General Morrison's voice again. Outstanding work today. We'll debrief the full operation once everyone is safe, but your actions saved American lives. Nicole acknowledged the commendation while watching the final groups of SEAL operators prepare for extraction. The mission had been tactically successful despite strategic failures, but the cost in wounded personnel and damaged equipment would require careful analysis. The enemy reinforcements were visible in the distance now, approximately 40 fighters moving toward the extraction point with obvious hostile intent. Their arrival would occur within minutes of the final helicopter departure, creating a narrow window for successful evacuation. All stations, final bird inbound. This is going to be close. The final Chinook helicopter descended through a gauntlet of enemy fire. As the approaching reinforcements closed to within 600 meters of the extraction point, Nicole pressed herself against the rocky barrier while coordinating the last defensive preparations with the remaining SEAL operators who had volunteered to hold the perimeter until every teammate was safely aboard. Extraction 3, this is Phoenix, she transmitted to the approaching aircraft. Landing zone is hot, with enemy reinforcements converging from multiple directions. Recommend combat approach with maximum door gunner support. Captain Jennifer Lee acknowledged from the helicopter's cockpit while her crew chief prepared the aircraft for what would likely be the most dangerous landing of the entire operation. Phoenix, Extraction 3. We're configured for hot pickup with 60 seconds maximum ground time. Have your people ready for immediate boarding. Nicole counted the remaining personnel around the perimeter, 43 SEAL operators who represented the final lift capacity of the extraction helicopter. Every second the aircraft remained on the ground would increase the probability of catastrophic losses to the converging enemy forces. Tank, final head count and equipment status. She called to Master Chief Dubois while observing enemy movement through her binoculars. Felix coordinated the final accountability check while directing his most experienced operators to positions where they could provide maximum defensive fire during the helicopter's vulnerable loading period. Phoenix, 43 personnel ready for extraction, essential equipment only, we're leaving everything non-critical behind. Nicole could see the wisdom in Tank's decision to abandon heavy equipment in favor of personnel protection. Weapons, ammunition, and gear could be replaced, but the experience and training represented by these elite warriors was irreplaceable. Viper, what's the estimated time until enemy reinforcements reach effective firing range? First Sergeant Valentina Ramirez had been tracking the enemy approach while coordinating observation posts around the defensive perimeter. Phoenix, maybe 4 minutes until they can bring the landing zone under direct fire. We need that bird down and loaded immediately. The mathematical precision required for successful extraction had narrowed to a window measured in seconds rather than minutes. Every movement, every decision, every tactical choice would determine whether the final personnel escaped or faced annihilation by overwhelming enemy forces. Ghost, do you have any remaining explosives that could delay the enemy advance? Xavier Monroe had been conserving his last demolition materials for exactly this situation, recognizing that the final extraction would require maximum defensive capability. Phoenix, I've got 2 Claymore mines positioned on the eastern approach route. Won't stop them, but it'll slow them down and cause casualties. Nicole positioned herself where she could observe both the approaching helicopter and the converging enemy forces, her empty rifle serving as a sophisticated observation instrument despite its inability to engage targets. The irony of her situation was not lost on her. The sniper who had saved 287 warriors was now defenseless except for her sidearm and tactical knowledge. Diesel, what's the status of enemy communications? Staff Sergeant Andre Coleman continued monitoring electronic signals while preparing his equipment for rapid extraction. Phoenix, they're starting to coordinate again, but it's still fragmented, maybe 10 more minutes before they achieve full tactical coordination. The Chinook flared for landing as door gunners opened fire on enemy positions that threatened the landing zone. The distinctive sound of M240 machine guns added to the chaos as aircrew members fought to suppress threats during the aircraft's most vulnerable phase of operation. "Taking fire from the tree line," shouted one of the door gunners as tracers streaked past the helicopter's massive rotors. "Multiple shooters! Eastern perimeter!" SEAL operators around the landing zone responded with coordinated suppressive fire, their remaining ammunition focused on protecting the extraction aircraft during its brief time on the ground. Nicole could observe the effectiveness of their defensive fire despite severe resource limitations. Loading commencing now. Tank directed personnel toward the helicopter's cargo ramp as the aircraft settled onto the rocky ground, with engines maintaining flight power for immediate departure. Nicole remained in position to provide final coordination while the extraction proceeded with military precision. Despite the chaos and constant enemy fire, the loading operation proceeded with the disciplined efficiency that characterized elite military units under extreme stress. Phoenix, this is Doc. Mason Flanagan transmitted while assisting the final wounded personnel onto the aircraft. All medical cases are loaded and secured, ready for departure in 30 seconds. The enemy reinforcements had closed to within 400 meters, their advance elements beginning to establish firing positions that would threaten the departing helicopter. Nicole could see through her binoculars that they carried heavy weapons capable of bringing down the aircraft if they achieved effective range. Extraction 3, enemy forces are within small arms range and closing rapidly. Recommend immediate departure as soon as loading is complete. Captain Lee acknowledged while monitoring her crew chief's loading progress and maintaining situational awareness of the deteriorating tactical environment. Phoenix, understood. We'll be wheels up in 20 seconds. Nicole began moving toward the helicopter while conducting final coordination with the defensive perimeter. All stations, begin withdrawal to the aircraft. Leapfrog movement. covering fire by teams. The withdrawal proceeded with textbook precision, as SEAL operators provided mutual support while moving toward the extraction point. Their training in close-quarters battle and small unit tactics was evident even under the most extreme circumstances. "Ghost, detonate eastern obstacles now," Nicole called as enemy advance elements approached the concealed mines. Xavier's Claymore mines detonated simultaneously, sending deadly steel fragments through the enemy formation and temporarily disrupting their advance toward the landing zone. The explosions bought precious seconds for the final personnel to reach the helicopter. "Phoenix, get on the bird!" Tank shouted while directing the last operators onto the aircraft. "You've done enough heroics for one day!" Nicole reached the helicopter's ramp as the crew chief signaled the pilot for immediate departure. The rotors increased pitch as the aircraft prepared to lift off, but enemy fire was intensifying as the reinforcements overcame the obstacles Ghost had placed in their path. "All personnel aboard," the crew chief announced while securing the cargo area for flight operations. "Ready for immediate departure." The Chinook lifted off under intense small arms fire as enemy forces reached positions where they could engage the aircraft with automatic weapons and rocket-propelled grenades. Nicole pressed herself against the aircraft's interior bulkhead, while door gunners returned fire at the enemy positions below. "Taking hits in the tail section," Captain Lee reported while maneuvering the aircraft to avoid concentrated enemy fire. "All systems functional, but we need to clear the area immediately." Through the helicopter's small window, Nicole could observe the village of Barawe falling away below as they gained altitude and distance from the hostile forces. The extraction was successful, but the tactical situation remained dangerous until they cleared the effective range of enemy weapons. "Phoenix, this is Iron Lady." Colonel Rebecca Steele transmitted as the helicopter cleared the immediate threat area. "Outstanding performance throughout this operation. All personnel are accounted for and en route to medical facilities." Nicole allowed herself to relax for the first time in over 24 hours, as the reality of successful mission completion settled in her mind. The mathematical impossibility of saving 287 trapped warriors had been achieved through precision, courage, and the kind of tactical innovation that defines special operations at their finest. "Tank, what's our final casualty count?" she asked, while observing the wounded personnel receiving medical attention throughout the aircraft's cargo area. Master Chief Dubois consulted his accountability roster while coordinating with Doc's medical team. "Phoenix, 23 wounded, 7 critical, but all are stable for transport. 0 killed in action, thanks to someone who refused to let us die in that hellhole." Nicole understood that Tank's commendation represented more than personal recognition. The successful extraction of 287 personnel without fatalities under those circumstances was unprecedented in modern military operations, achieved through a combination of tactical innovation and individual sacrifice that would be studied for decades. "Doc, how are the critical cases responding to treatment?" Mason Flanagan moved between patients, while monitoring vital signs and coordinating with the helicopter's medical equipment. "Phoenix, they're stable but need immediate surgical intervention once we reach the medical facility. Another hour and we might have lost some of them." The helicopter's steady flight towards safety provided time for Nicole to process the events of the past day. The intelligence failure that had enabled the sophisticated ambush, the foreign coordination of al-Shabaab forces, and the strategic decisions that had nearly resulted in catastrophic American losses. "Eagle Eye Phoenix, what's the preliminary assessment of the intelligence breach that enabled this ambush?" Captain Angela Singh's response carried the weight of someone grappling with systemic failures within the intelligence community. "Phoenix, initial analysis suggests the enemy had detailed knowledge of our operational plans, timing, and personnel deployments. We're looking at potential compromise at multiple levels." Nicole had suspected as much from observing the enemy's tactical preparation and coordination. The sophistication of their defensive positions and the precision of their timing suggested access to classified American operational procedures and intelligence. "Viper, what did your reconnaissance team observe about the foreign advisors coordinating enemy operations?" First Sergeant Valentina Ramirez had been positioned to observe enemy command and control throughout the engagement, providing valuable intelligence about the nature of the threat they had faced. "Phoenix, the coordination was too sophisticated for local forces. Someone with advanced military training was directing their operations, possibly former special forces or intelligence personnel. The implications of foreign involvement in the ambush extended far beyond the tactical engagement in Somalia. If hostile intelligence services were actively coordinating attacks against American Special Operations Forces, the strategic calculus for future missions would require significant revision. "All stations, this is actual," came Lieutenant General Morrison's voice as the helicopter approached friendly territory. "Operation Sandviper is concluded. Preliminary assessment indicates tactical success despite strategic intelligence failures. Full debriefing will commence upon arrival at base facilities." Nicole recognized that the general's carefully worded assessment acknowledged both the successful extraction and the systemic failures that had made it necessary. Someone at senior levels would be held accountable for the intelligence breach that had nearly resulted in catastrophic losses. "Phoenix, this is Steele." General Nathaniel Pemberton's voice carried obvious concern about the broader implications of the engagement. "Your actions today prevented a strategic disaster. The intelligence community owes you a significant debt." Nicole understood that General Pemberton's comment reflected political concerns about the intelligence failure, rather than tactical assessment of the military engagement. The successful extraction had prevented a public relations catastrophe that would have had strategic implications far beyond Somalia. As the helicopter continued its flight towards safety, Nicole observed the SEAL operators around her beginning the psychological transition from combat operations to post-mission analysis. The camaraderie and mutual support that had sustained them through the engagement remained evident even as the immediate danger receded. "Ranger, what's your assessment of enemy capabilities for future operations?" Petty Officer Trevor Walsh had been monitoring communications and coordinating intelligence throughout the engagement, providing valuable insight into enemy organizational capabilities. "Phoenix, they demonstrated sophisticated planning and coordination that suggests ongoing foreign support. This wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a larger pattern of enhanced enemy capabilities." Nicole filed the assessment away for future consideration while focusing on the immediate relief of successful mission completion. The mathematical impossibility had been achieved, but the strategic questions raised by the engagement would require careful analysis and institutional response. The helicopter began its final approach to the medical facility where surgical teams awaited the arrival of wounded personnel. Nicole could see through the window that extensive preparations had been made to receive and treat the casualties from Operation Sandviper. "Doc, are you satisfied with the medical preparation for our wounded?" Mason Flanagan coordinated with the flight medics while monitoring his most critical patients. "Phoenix, they've got full surgical teams standing by. These men are going to receive the best possible care." As the helicopter touched down at the medical facility, Nicole realized that her role in Operation Sandviper was approaching its conclusion. The tactical engagement was over, but the strategic implications would continue to develop for months or years as intelligence analysts attempted to understand the full scope of the threat they had faced. "Phoenix, this is Iron Lady." Colonel Steele transmitted as medical personnel prepared to offload casualties. "Report to debriefing immediately after medical clearance. Washington wants a full tactical assessment within 6 hours." Nicole acknowledged the order while watching wounded SEAL operators being transferred to waiting medical teams. The sight of American warriors receiving proper medical care after surviving the impossible provided a sense of completion that justified every risk she had accepted during the past 24 hours. The fluorescent lights of the medical facility's debriefing room cast harsh shadows across the conference table where Nicole sat facing a panel of senior officers whose expressions reflected both relief and deep concern. 12 hours had passed since the extraction from Somalia, time enough for preliminary medical treatment and the kind of institutional soul-searching that followed near-catastrophic intelligence failures. Colonel Rebecca Steele opened the formal debriefing session with documents that carried classification markings Nicole had never seen before. "Staff Sergeant Thorne, this session is being recorded at the highest levels of classification. Your tactical observations from Operation Sandviper are considered critical to national security assessment." Nicole had showered and changed into clean utilities, but she could still smell the cordite and dust of Somalia in her memory. The transition from life-or-death combat operations to sterile conference rooms always created a psychological disconnect that required conscious adjustment. "Colonel, my tactical assessment is straightforward. The enemy possessed detailed knowledge of our operational plans, timing, personnel assignments, and standard procedures. That level of intelligence preparation is impossible without access to classified American planning documents. General Nathaniel Pemberton leaned forward from his position at the head of the table, his Pentagon authority evident in the way other officers deferred to his presence. "Staff Sergeant, you're alleging a security breach within the highest levels of Special Operations Command. That's a serious accusation requiring substantial evidence." Nicole had anticipated resistance to her assessment from senior officers whose careers were built on the assumption that American operational security was superior to enemy intelligence capabilities. The evidence, however, was undeniable for anyone who had observed the engagement directly. "General, the enemy established interlocking fields of fire that specifically countered SEAL team movement patterns. They positioned heavy weapons at choke points that matched our standard extraction routes. They implemented communication jamming on frequencies that matched our primary and alternate channels. That coordination requires detailed knowledge of American tactical doctrine." Lieutenant General Patricia Morrison entered the conference room with an aide carrying additional classified documents, her presence immediately shifting the dynamics of the debriefing session. Nicole recognized her as the officer who had authorized the drone strikes that had saved the trapped SEAL teams. "Staff Sergeant Thorne," Morrison began while reviewing the preliminary reports, "your actions during Operation Sandviper prevented what could have been the worst special operations disaster in American military history. However, the intelligence implications of your observations extend far beyond Somalia." Nicole understood that Morrison's comment reflected concerns about systemic vulnerabilities within the intelligence community, rather than tactical lessons learned from a single engagement. The sophistication of the enemy preparation suggested ongoing penetration of American operational planning. "General, during the engagement, I observed foreign advisors coordinating al-Shabaab operations with tactical knowledge that exceeded anything available through public sources or captured equipment. Someone with access to classified American training materials was directing their defensive preparations." Captain Angela Singh consulted intelligence reports while adding context to Nicole's battlefield observations. "Staff Sergeant, signal intelligence collected during the operation confirms foreign communication protocols and encryption methods that suggest state-level support for the al-Shabaab operation. The implications of state-sponsored intelligence cooperation with terrorist organizations represented a significant escalation in the threats facing American Special Operations Forces worldwide." Nicole could see the concern in senior officers' expressions as they processed the strategic ramifications. "Which state actors are suspected of providing this level of support?" Nicole asked while reviewing satellite imagery from the engagement area. Morrison exchanged glances with General Pemberton before responding, her answer carrying diplomatic sensitivity. "Staff Sergeant, that analysis is being conducted at levels above this briefing. Your focus should remain on tactical lessons learned and operational recommendations." Nicole recognized the diplomatic language that senior officers used when political considerations override military analysis. Someone at the highest levels of government was making strategic decisions about how to respond to foreign intelligence penetration of American operations. "Colonel Steele, what's the status of the wounded personnel from the operation?" Rebecca provided medical updates while coordinating with hospital staff throughout the facility. "Staff Sergeant, all 23 wounded are receiving appropriate care. The 7 critical cases underwent successful surgery, and complete recovery is expected for all personnel." The medical success provided some consolation for the tactical failures that had made the engagement necessary. 0 fatalities among 287 deployed personnel under those circumstances represented unprecedented success, but it had been achieved through individual heroism rather than institutional competence. "Tank asked me to extend his team's appreciation for your actions," Rebecca continued. "Master Chief Dubois wanted you to know that every SEAL who came home owes their life to your decision to abandon standard sniper doctrine." Nicole appreciated Tank's message, but she understood that individual recognition could not address the systemic problems that had created the crisis. The intelligence breach that had enabled the sophisticated ambush remained unresolved, threatening future American operations worldwide. "General Morrison, what measures are being implemented to prevent similar intelligence compromises in future operations?" Morrison's response reflected the kind of institutional damage control that followed major security failures. "Staff Sergeant, comprehensive security reviews are being conducted across all levels of special operations planning. Personnel with access to operational details are undergoing enhanced screening procedures." Nicole recognized that enhanced screening represented reactive measures rather than proactive solutions to intelligence penetration. The enemy had already demonstrated capabilities that suggested ongoing access to American operational planning, requiring more substantial countermeasures. General, reactive security measures may be insufficient if the compromise involves personnel with legitimate access to operational planning. The enemy's tactical preparation suggests real-time intelligence rather than historical information. Pemberton's expression darkened as he processed the implications of Nicole's assessment. Real-time intelligence suggested active penetration rather than historical document theft, a far more serious threat to operational security. Staff Sergeant, you're suggesting that hostile intelligence services have current access to our operational planning. That would represent a catastrophic failure of counterintelligence. Nicole had observed enemy tactical decisions that could only have been made with access to American planning documents created within days of the operation. The timing and precision of their defensive preparations exceeded anything achievable through historical intelligence or tactical speculation. General, the enemy knew our insertion timing, landing zones, personnel assignments, and extraction procedures. They anticipated our tactical responses and prepared specific countermeasures. That level of preparation requires current intelligence access. Morrison closed the classified documents while preparing to conclude the formal debriefing session. Staff Sergeant, your tactical assessment and recommendations will be forwarded to appropriate authorities for strategic evaluation. Your role in this matter is concluded pending further orders. Nicole understood that Morrison's dismissal represented institutional discomfort with the implications of her observations rather than completion of the intelligence analysis. Senior officers preferred tactical explanations that did not challenge fundamental assumptions about operational security. General, will there be follow-up operations to address the intelligence networks that enabled this ambush? Morrison's response carried the finality of strategic decisions made at levels beyond military commanders. Staff Sergeant, operational responses to intelligence threats are determined by National Command Authority. Your focus should return to your primary military specialties. As the formal debriefing concluded, Nicole reflected on the disconnect between tactical reality and institutional response. The evidence of intelligence penetration was overwhelming, but institutional inertia prevented acknowledgement of systemic vulnerabilities. Colonel Steele, what are my assignment options following this operation? Rebecca had been reviewing personnel files while coordinating Nicole's post-mission processing. Staff Sergeant, you have multiple options. Advanced sniper instructor positions, special operations selection cadre, or assignment to specialized counter-sniper units. Nicole considered the career implications of Operation Sandviper while processing the institutional response to her tactical observations. The successful extraction had enhanced her professional reputation, but the intelligence concerns remained unaddressed. Colonel, I'd like to request assignment to units focused on countering foreign intelligence penetration of special operations. This problem is going to get worse before it gets better. Rebecca understood Nicole's concern, but also recognized the institutional limitations that prevented direct action against intelligence threats. Staff Sergeant, counterintelligence operations are conducted by specialized agencies rather than military units. Nicole had anticipated the institutional boundaries that separated military operations from counterintelligence, but the Somalia engagement had demonstrated that tactical forces required better protection from intelligence penetration. Colonel, tactical units need personnel with experience recognizing intelligence-driven enemy preparations. Someone needs to train special operations forces to identify when they're facing enemy forces with access to American operational planning. Morrison returned to the conference room with additional classified materials, her expression reflecting the kind of strategic decision-making that occurred when tactical observations challenged institutional assumptions. Staff Sergeant Thorne, your tactical innovations during Operation Sandviper are being incorporated into special operations training curricula. Your techniques for providing precision support to multiple teams under extreme circumstances will be studied and replicated. Nicole appreciated the institutional recognition, but she remained concerned about the unaddressed intelligence vulnerabilities that had created the crisis. Training innovations could improve tactical performance, but they could not address strategic intelligence failures. General, tactical innovations are valuable, but they're reactive measures. Preventing similar situations requires addressing the intelligence penetration that enabled enemy preparation. Morrison consulted her classified documents while making strategic calculations that extended far beyond military considerations. Staff Sergeant, intelligence matters are being addressed through appropriate channels. Your contribution has been tactical excellence under impossible circumstances. As the debriefing session approached its conclusion, Nicole recognized that institutional responses to Operation Sandviper would focus on tactical lessons rather than strategic vulnerabilities. The successful extraction had prevented catastrophe, but it had not addressed the underlying problems that had created the crisis. Colonel Steele, when will the full after-action report be completed? Rebecca coordinated with intelligence analysts while managing the extensive documentation requirements that followed major special operations engagements. Staff Sergeant, preliminary reports are being finalized now, but comprehensive analysis will require several months. Nicole understood that comprehensive analysis often became institutional justification for predetermined conclusions rather than objective assessment of tactical reality. The political implications of acknowledging intelligence penetration would influence analytical conclusions. General Morrison, will tactical personnel have access to the final analysis? Morrison's response reflected the classification restrictions that limited access to strategic intelligence assessments. Staff Sergeant, distribution of final analysis will be determined by classification requirements and operational necessity. As senior officers began departing the conference room, Nicole realized that her role in Operation Sandviper had concluded despite the unresolved strategic questions raised by the engagement. The institutional machinery had processed her tactical observations while avoiding their strategic implications. Staff Sergeant, Morrison said while gathering her classified materials, your actions in Somalia represent the finest traditions of American military service. 24 hours ago, you were an excellent sniper. Today, you're a legend. Nicole appreciated the recognition, but she understood that legends were often created to avoid addressing institutional failures. The successful extraction had provided a positive narrative that distracted from intelligence vulnerabilities that threatened future operations. General, I'd prefer to be remembered as someone who identified a problem that was subsequently fixed, rather than someone who compensated for systemic failures through individual heroism. Morrison's smile carried the kind of institutional wisdom that came from decades of navigating military bureaucracy. Staff Sergeant, in this business, sometimes individual heroism is the only solution we have for systemic failures. The trick is knowing when to apply it. As Nicole prepared to leave the debriefing room, she reflected on the strange mathematics of military service. 287 elite warriors had been saved through tactical innovation and individual sacrifice, but the intelligence vulnerabilities that had endangered them remained unaddressed. The institutional machinery would process Operation Sandviper according to established procedures, creating reports and recommendations that satisfied bureaucratic requirements while avoiding uncomfortable questions about intelligence security. Nicole would receive recognition and career advancement while the underlying problems persisted. Outside the conference room, Master Chief Felix Dubois waited with an expression that reflected both gratitude and understanding. Phoenix, heard you gave the brass some uncomfortable truths in there. Nicole joined Tank in the hallway while processing the institutional response to her tactical observations. Tank, telling uncomfortable truths is easier than living with comfortable lies. These people need to understand what they're up against. Tank's experience with military bureaucracy had taught him to manage expectations about institutional responses to tactical reality. Phoenix, sometimes the best we can do is save the people in front of us and hope someone eventually fixes the bigger problems. Nicole understood Tank's pragmatic perspective, but she remained concerned about future operations that would face similar intelligence-driven threats without adequate preparation or countermeasures. Tank, how many more teams are going to walk into sophisticated ambushes before someone acknowledges that we have a serious intelligence problem? Tank's response reflected the fatalistic acceptance that came from decades of military service under imperfect institutions. Phoenix, that's above our pay grade. Our job is to be ready when they need impossible things done under impossible circumstances. As they walked through the medical facility corridors, Nicole observed wounded SEAL operators receiving treatment while maintaining the professional dignity that characterized elite military units. Their sacrifice had meaning, but it would be hollow if similar situations continued due to unaddressed intelligence vulnerabilities. Tank, these men deserve better intelligence preparation than they received. Someone needs to be held accountable for the planning failures that created this situation. Tank understood Nicole's frustration, but he also recognized the institutional realities that prevented meaningful accountability for intelligence failures. Phoenix, accountability in this business usually means finding someone junior enough to blame while protecting everyone senior enough to matter. Nicole had hoped that the scale of the near disaster in Somalia would force institutional recognition of systemic problems, but the successful extraction had provided cover for avoiding uncomfortable questions about intelligence security. The mathematics of military bureaucracy favored narratives that emphasized individual heroism while minimizing institutional failures. Operation Sand Viper would be remembered for unprecedented tactical success rather than strategic intelligence collapse, ensuring that similar vulnerabilities would persist. 6 months after Operation Sand Viper, Nicole stood on the firing line at Fort Benning's Advanced Marksmanship Training Facility, watching a class of Navy SEAL snipers practice the precision techniques she had developed during those desperate hours in Somalia. The Georgia morning was crisp and clear, a stark contrast to the scorching heat and chaos that had forged these new tactical doctrines. Staff Sergeant Thorne called Chief Petty Officer Marcus Stone, one of the SEAL operators who had been trapped during the original engagement. The new students are asking about the mathematical calculations you used for simultaneous target engagement. Nicole moved down the firing line, observing each student's form and technique while considering how to translate life-or-death experience into classroom instruction. The challenge of teaching tactical innovation was communicating not just the mechanics, but the mindset required for operating beyond conventional limitations. "The mathematics are secondary to situational awareness," she replied while adjusting one student's scope position. "Understanding the tactical picture allows you to prioritize targets based on threat assessment rather than convenience. You engage what needs to be eliminated, not what's easiest to hit." The advanced sniper instructor position at Fort Benning had provided Nicole with the opportunity to institutionalize the lessons learned from Operation Sand Viper while avoiding the bureaucratic limitations that had frustrated her during the post-mission debriefing. Teaching allowed her to prepare future operators for the kinds of sophisticated threats they would inevitably face. Chief Stone have the intelligence briefings for this class included information about foreign-assisted enemy operations. Marcus had been assigned to the training cadre specifically because of his experience during the Somalia engagement, bringing tactical credibility that enhanced student receptivity to unconventional training methods. Staff Sergeant, the briefings covered general threat assessments but nothing specific about intelligence-driven enemy tactics. That information remains classified at levels above this training program. Nicole had expected as much, but she continued to advocate for realistic threat preparation, despite institutional resistance to acknowledging intelligence vulnerabilities. Students deserve training that reflected actual threats rather than sanitized versions that protected institutional sensibilities. Chief, ensure that scenario training includes enemy forces with detailed knowledge of American tactical procedures. These students need to practice operating when standard doctrines have been compromised. The training scenarios Nicole had developed forced students to adapt when enemy forces demonstrated uncanny knowledge of American movement patterns, communication procedures, and tactical responses. It was the closest approximation she could create to the reality of intelligence-compromised operations. Staff Sergeant Thorne interrupted Colonel James Harrison, the new commandant of the sniper school. "You have visitors from Washington requesting a briefing on your tactical innovations." Nicole recognized the colonel's careful phrasing as diplomatic language for senior officers who wanted to understand how her Somalia techniques could be applied to broader strategic challenges. 6 months of bureaucratic interest had taught her to manage expectations about institutional willingness to address uncomfortable realities. "Colonel, are these visitors interested in tactical applications or strategic implications?" Harrison's expression suggested that the distinction mattered more than he was comfortable discussing in front of students. "Staff Sergeant, perhaps we should continue this conversation in my office." Nicole assigned Chief Stone to continue the class while she accompanied Colonel Harrison to his office, where she found Captain Angela Singh waiting with classified documents and the kind of serious expression that indicated significant developments. "Staff Sergeant," Angela began while securing the office against electronic surveillance, "we've identified the source of the intelligence breach that enabled the Somalia ambush. The information comes from compartmented sources that require careful handling." Nicole had hoped that ongoing investigation would eventually identify the intelligence penetration, but she had also learned to expect disappointment from institutional follow-up on security concerns. "Captain, is this intelligence actionable, or is it another case of knowing about the problem without being able to address it?" Angela consulted her classified materials while choosing her words carefully. Staff Sergeant, the penetration involved a foreign intelligence operative with legitimate access to special operations planning. The individual has been neutralized, but the methods used suggest ongoing vulnerabilities. Nicole understood that neutralized could mean anything from reassignment to elimination, but the important point was that the immediate threat had been addressed. The reference to ongoing vulnerabilities, however, suggested that systemic problems persisted. Captain, what measures are being implemented to prevent similar penetration in future operations? Angela's response reflected the kind of institutional compromise that balanced security improvements with operational necessity. Staff Sergeant, enhanced counterintelligence screening has been implemented for personnel with access to operational planning, but complete security isolation would compromise coordination capabilities. Nicole recognized the eternal balance between security and functionality that characterized military operations. Perfect security was impossible, but reasonable improvements could reduce vulnerabilities without crippling operational effectiveness. Captain, are the tactical techniques developed during Operation Sandviper being incorporated into broader training curricula? Angela confirmed what Nicole had observed through her teaching assignment at Fort Benning. Staff Sergeant, your innovations are being integrated into sniper training, special operations instruction, and scenario development across multiple military branches. The institutional adoption of her tactical techniques provided some satisfaction, but Nicole remained concerned about the strategic vulnerabilities that had created the need for such innovations. Training improvements were valuable, but they represented reactive measures rather than proactive solutions. Captain, has there been any follow-up investigation into the foreign advisors coordinating enemy operations in Somalia? Angela's hesitation suggested that the answer involved diplomatic sensitivities that extended beyond military considerations. Staff Sergeant, that analysis involves intelligence relationships with allied nations that cannot be discussed at this classification level. Nicole understood that some intelligence sources required protection that limited distribution of analytical products, but she also recognized diplomatic language when she encountered it. Someone was making strategic decisions about how to respond to foreign intelligence activities. Staff Sergeant, Colonel Harrison interjected while managing the classified discussion. You've been selected for assignment to a special projects unit focused on developing countermeasures for intelligence-compromised operations. The position would involve both tactical development and operational implementation. Nicole had requested exactly this type of assignment during her post-mission debriefing, but she had doubted that institutional inertia would allow such specialization. The offer suggested that someone at senior levels had decided to address intelligence vulnerabilities seriously. Colonel, what authority would this unit have to implement operational changes based on threat assessment? Harrison exchanged glances with Captain Singh before responding, his answer reflecting the kind of institutional authority that comes with high-level support. Staff Sergeant, the unit reports directly to Joint Special Operations Command with tasking authority from the National Security Council. Your recommendations would carry significant weight. Nicole recognized that such reporting relationships represented serious institutional commitment to addressing the problems identified during Operation Sandviper. Someone at the highest levels of government had decided that intelligence vulnerabilities required dedicated attention. Colonel, I accept the assignment. When do I report? Angela gathered her classified materials while coordinating Nicole's transition to the new unit. Staff Sergeant, you'll receive orders within 2 weeks. Initial assignment is to analyze ongoing special operations for potential intelligence vulnerabilities. As the meeting concluded, Nicole reflected on the institutional journey from tactical crisis to strategic response. The near disaster in Somalia had required 6 months of bureaucratic processing, but the system had eventually recognized the need for specialized capabilities to address intelligence threats. Captain Singh, will I have access to operational intelligence that allows meaningful threat assessment? Angela's response reflected the kind of access that comes with specialized assignments and senior-level support. Staff Sergeant, you'll have access to compartmented intelligence sources and ongoing operations analysis. Your tactical experience will be combined with strategic intelligence to identify vulnerabilities. Nicole understood that the new assignment would provide opportunities to address the systemic problems that had created the Somalia crisis, but she also recognized that institutional change occurred slowly and incompletely. Perfect solutions were impossible, but meaningful improvements were achievable with persistent effort. Outside Colonel Harrison's office, Chief Stone waited with questions about continuing the training class. Staff Sergeant, the students are asking about follow-up scenarios that challenge their tactical assumptions. Nicole had developed training exercises specifically designed to force students beyond conventional thinking, recognizing that future threats would require innovative responses rather than textbook solutions. Chief, implement Scenario 7, enemy forces with detailed knowledge of student tactical preferences and communication patterns. Force them to develop new approaches when standard procedures have been compromised. Marcus understood the value of training that prepared students for the worst-case scenarios, rather than ideal conditions. Staff Sergeant, should I emphasize individual innovation or team adaptation? Nicole considered the question while reflecting on her experience during Operation Sandviper, where individual decision-making had been essential, but team coordination had remained critical. Chief emphasized both. Individual innovation creates tactical opportunities, but team coordination exploits them effectively. These students need to understand when to deviate from doctrine and when to maintain unit cohesion. As they returned to the firing line, Nicole observed students implementing the tactical techniques she had developed during those desperate hours in Somalia. The mathematical precision and tactical innovation that had saved 287 elite warriors was being transmitted to future generations of military professionals. Staff Sergeant called one of the student snipers. The scenario parameters suggest that our communications are compromised and standard extraction procedures are ineffective. How do we maintain team coordination under those conditions? Nicole recognized the tactical challenge she had faced in Somalia, but she also understood that teaching required students to develop their own solutions rather than memorizing instructor responses. What alternatives to standard communication procedures are available when primary channels are compromised? She asked while encouraging analytical thinking. The student considered the question while assessing his equipment and training. Hand signals, predetermined rally points, and timing-based coordination that doesn't require radio communication. Nicole nodded approvingly while recognizing the student's grasp of fundamental principles. Those are exactly the techniques that allow coordination when conventional methods are unavailable. Practice them until they become instinctive. As the training day concluded, Nicole reflected on the satisfaction of teaching tactical skills that could save lives in future operations. The institutional machinery was slowly incorporating lessons learned from Operation Sandviper, creating capabilities that would better prepare American forces for sophisticated threats. Chief Stone, what's your assessment of student readiness for advanced tactical scenarios? Marcus had been evaluating student progress throughout the training cycle, identifying individuals with the potential for specialized assignments and tactical innovation. Staff Sergeant, this class shows exceptional adaptability and tactical thinking. They're ready for scenarios that challenge conventional assumptions and force creative problem-solving. Nicole appreciated Marcus's assessment while recognizing that exceptional students provided the foundation for institutional advancement. Future tactical innovations would come from personnel with the intellectual flexibility to operate beyond established limitations. As she prepared to transition to her new assignment, Nicole understood that Operation Sandviper had been both an ending and a beginning. The tactical crisis had ended with successful extraction of all American personnel, but the strategic implications continued to drive institutional changes that would affect military operations for years to come. The mathematics of military service had evolved through her experience. Individual heroism remained essential, but institutional adaptation was equally important for addressing systemic threats. Her role was changing from tactical operator to strategic developer, but the fundamental mission remained constant, protecting American lives through professional excellence and tactical innovation. Walking across the Fort Benning training facility as evening approached, Nicole could see student snipers practicing the techniques she had developed during the most challenging engagement of her career. The knowledge gained through desperate improvisation in Somalia was becoming institutional doctrine that would prepare future generations for the sophisticated threats they would inevitably face. The sunset reminded her of that morning in Somalia when she had first observed the village of Barawe through her scope, beginning an engagement that would test every aspect of her training and character. The mathematical impossibility of saving 287 trapped warriors had been achieved through precision, courage, and the willingness to operate beyond conventional limitations. 6 months later, those lessons were being transmitted to new students who would face their own impossible challenges in defense of American interests worldwide. The cycle of training, innovation, and tactical development continued, each generation building upon the sacrifices and achievements of those who came before. Nicole's role in that cycle was evolving from tactical operator to strategic educator, from individual hero to institutional mentor. The transition reflected both personal growth and professional recognition, but it also represented the natural progression of military careers dedicated to excellence and service. As she considered her new assignment and the challenges it would present, Nicole understood that the lessons of Operation Sandviper extended far beyond tactical innovation. The engagement had demonstrated the importance of individual initiative, institutional adaptation, and the persistent pursuit of professional excellence in defense of American values. The mathematics were clear. Protecting American lives required both individual heroism and institutional effectiveness. Nicole's contribution would continue in different forms, but the fundamental mission remained unchanged. Somewhere in the world, American warriors would face impossible odds and require the kind of tactical innovation and professional excellence that had saved 287 elite operators in the unforgiving heat of Somalia. The legacy of Operation Sandviper would live on through the students she had trained, the techniques she had developed, and the institutional changes her experience had prompted. It was a legacy measured not in personal recognition, but in American lives saved through tactical innovation and unwavering commitment to professional excellence. The end. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoy this one, you won't want to miss this. Just click to watch. And don't forget to subscribe. It would mean a lot.